Hello, this is Sam here,
It's Jonathan.
and this is the first episode of the podcast. So, welcome. This week, we're going to really introduce ourselves, talk about the company a little bit, and talk about some of our aspirations for the podcast. So, as I mentioned, I'm Sam Drawshak. I have been doing process consulting and what I call process science work for the last maybe 12, 13 years. And this is Jonathan, my partner.
Thanks, Sam. And this is Jonathan Adams, and I lead a process consulting team. I've done so for the past 10 years. And Sam and I met, I don't know about how long ago now? Uh,
I guess it's been 5 years, 6 years.
about 5 or 6 years ago, and in the context of an interview. And I recall how at the end of the day, I think the interview from a technical perspective didn't go great. But what I learned pretty quickly was that despite having engaged with, I would say, every top consulting entity out there, Sam brought a perspective and a capability that was lacking in all my engagement until then.
Yeah, and that's probably a better segue to a more detailed history on my part. So when I say I've been doing process consulting work, like many people who are interested in consulting, I did some time with Accenture. I worked in small consulting situations, and then eventually even when I was working with Jonathan, I started to do independent consulting. But I've always had issue with some of the more conventional consulting techniques that have been going out there, not just techniques about method in the field, but also how companies put together a consulting agency or a consultancy, how they sold their product, how they engage with companies. And I was definitely filled with a lot of angst, and I wanted to do good work for businesses. But when I met Jonathan, to his point, I might not have been your conventional consultant or the consultant that would have been like, this is what you'd expect from maybe a big four consulting firm trained person. But I had a lot of ideas, and Jonathan really gave me a platform originally within his company to start launching some of those ideas and being entrepreneurial. And I think that particular opportunity and openness in Jonathan kind of led us to this podcast and this company and this new idea that we're bringing forward today.
And I would say a lot of that idea is we're taking it from the perspective of consultants and the value they add or don't add to the market in general. But it really is solving for the problem that everyone knows exists, which is there's just a tremendous amount of waste in all activity that's going on at almost any entity that exists today. And that waste finds itself in efforts that can't possibly succeed from the outset, to not being able to identify even what they should be working on, and a host of problems along those lines. And taking it from the consulting perspective, or the traditional one, is everyone's focused on the problem that's being asked of them. So a consultant might come in to address, a given scope of work, but whether or not that scope of work should occur at all is not even asked, and not even addressed all too often. So, Sam, I see you nodding. So,
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of the same thing. So Jonathan hires me, and we're working on some of the same problems at the company that Jonathan was working at. And I was also trying to simultaneously think about how we could solve some of these problems of unqualified questions that businesses were just hiring people to work on, and all this wasteful activity going on. And eventually, we kept talking, and we thought we really need to be unconstrained from our current job, from all this other consulting work, and form a company that could have a deep focus on the problem that Jonathan just articulated, which is, what is the problem that companies are trying to solve? What is the real problem? Not just, hey, we've got fires that we need to hire people to put out over and over and over again, but what can we do to meaningfully change the way the market thinks about problems, consulting level problems, hiring consultants to solve them? The whole exchange just seemed broken, and the more and more companies we work with and the more companies we saw, we had a common interest in trying to solve them, trying to understand, I would say, the true value that companies bring to the table and how to enhance and to work with that. And that's really the origin of what the company is, the Truvle company, which is what we're forming today. And that's Jonathan and I's newest endeavor together for the first time, to say, we're going to build a company that focuses squarely on this particular subset of issues, like complex level issues that you'd hire a consultant to normally hire, but make sure you're doing it right and make sure that you don't have to pay big ticket to kind of solve these things, or do you even have to solve them? So giving really that knowledge out to people, democratizing that knowledge, that's really part of the mission of Truvle as a company.
And that's the key. The key is we believe it can be democratized. And the reason we believe it can be is because the fundamentals are the same no matter what entity is, no matter what problem is being solved. And that's very, very different than the current state of consulting out there. Most consulting companies, or every consulting company, is selling a particular maturity model, a particular approach to solving certain problems, and that's their secret ingredient. And what we're saying is that there is none. There are fundamental, what we call science, principles that apply universally. And we've seen this in every context that we've applied it, be it a Fortune 100 company, be it a small startup. The fundamentals equally apply. And what we're aiming to do is to digitize that into a system so that everybody has access to this ability.
Yeah. And I think it's worth talking about the science piece a little bit because, I've had stones thrown at me over the years when I started to coin the term process science or process scientist. And, when people think about business, they wonder how scientific can it be. A lot of times science and business are not conflated. You can go to school to learn about business, but what Jonathon's pointing out, hey, there's some fundamental principles that underlie all business and are constant across all business. That's not really talked about that often, and it's a bit of a bold statement. But really, we don't want to sound as extreme as that might come across as, because when we talk about science, we're really talking about making sure that we're being very rigorous about testing what we say is good business practice across many different contexts, many different spaces, and that it can be independently verified by other people. So the point being, I don't have to hire a consultant in one space and then hire a consultant in another space for the same problem and expect them to give me different answers. That's part of the problem, right? There should be a consistency. There should be a level of consistency that if you have the same inputs to a business problem, one would think you could create a method that gives you the same outputs for how to solve that problem. That's where if you can say you can do that, you're getting to a scientific level of rigor. So when Jonathan and I talk about a consulting company or a consulting knowledge base, let's say, that we're putting into software, it has to pass that level of rigor to be what we would consider good quality at Truvle, to say that it doesn't matter, who's applying it. You're going to get the same result and you're going to get a consistent result. And I think that's sort of the scientific aspect. So I don't want anyone to think out there that, okay, we've already developed an entire science that could be written into 50 tomes worth of knowledge about how this is going to go. But everything that we do deploy in our software, in our advisement, in our conversations, you can guarantee that our discipline and our rigor says that this has been verified across many different studies, many different situations, and that we're getting the same results. And it doesn't matter that Jonathon and I are doing it. We're really just showing that anyone can do it. And I think you have to reach that level of consistency in order to say, we're going to take something as big and complicated as consulting work and put it into software.
And that's the key, though, the fact that anyone could apply it. So if you hire a consulting entity today, there's going to be many factors that will determine whether or not it's a successful engagement. Now, that's even saying that it has a chance of being successful, because I don't know what I forgot the latest statistics, but it's over 50% of any consulting engagements don't result in any return of investment, not even to cover the cost of the consulting engagement. So that's problem one. Problem two is, if there is such proprietary and specific knowledge out there, why then is it possible that if you go to any two different teams for the same exact problem from the same exact consulting company, it's even remotely possible that you can get a different result from that engagement? And everybody knows that that's true, because everyone thinks it also does matter about the team. What we're saying from a science perspective is that the principles we're speaking to could equally be applied by any team, and you're going to get the same exact result, because the input that you're looking at and the factors that we think matter most, and then the output that matters most, would be consistent no matter what the specific context is. And that's A. I think B is that generally, if anybody had been able to solve this, it wouldn't be possible that some 70% of transformations or 70% of enterprise resource planning type implementations fail. Everybody knows this. So it's either a failure in conception, that the project should never have gone through, or in execution. But either way, if this has been going on for as long as it has, how is it possible that it keeps going on, and that anyone can deign to say that their consulting company is solving it when they all agree that they're part of the same exact statistics? So what we're saying is, at least at a minimum, applying our tool and applying our methodology, you're going to get a consistent result and a likelihood and the factors that will impact the ability for anything to succeed. So I think those are the main distinguishing characteristics.
Yeah, and I'd say that really well defines what we're trying to do at Truvle and what you're going to see a lot of on this podcast, which is real conversations about the problems that we've seen in the marketplace. And, we hope to have lively discussions about what those problems are, how they keep getting repeated over and over again. How does the crazy persist? Jonathon and I talk about a lot in our experiences. Like I said, I've been consulting in-house, externally, by myself, have my own consultancy. I considered it myself to have a wide range of consulting experience. And what I can say consistently is that it's crazy everywhere. Every company has these giant problems and they're trying to solve them the same way over and over and failing over and over and over. And, between talking about the use cases and really getting in there and trying to help people, Jonathan and I both came to the table and said, there has to be a faster and more reliable way to tackle some of these big problems. And it really speaks to also, if you think about consulting, one of the things that it's important is everything's getting faster. The market's getting faster. How can you expect to hire a team to come into your company and you need something done in 3 months, when in reality, a consultant with no experience with your company is going to have to come up to speed in 6 weeks just to even be able to talk your language, talk about your culture, understand your problem. And we know this. We know this when we hire consultants for ridiculous rates, and we do it anyway. And we expect them every time to come up with a different result after, ramping up for 6 weeks and then making a recommendation in 6 weeks that's going to change the entire strategy of the organization. It's a difficult ask. So why do we keep doing it this way? Why is this industry so big? And these are the questions that we've been a part of. We've been a part of the solution, a part of the problem. But now I think that we're combining forces to really bring some insight and products out there in any way we can. It's kind of now our life purpose, I'd say, right, Jonathan?
100%. And it's very interesting because how does it persist, and how is it possible that all this waste exists? Everybody knows it's there. Everybody knows that there's tons of waste. It's not even a question. Everyone knows that all these major transformation efforts fail all the time. What's really interesting, though, is you could take any consulting product, you take any final report, and within an organization, you can have diametrically opposed constituents saying that the report stands for the path forward that they want. So even the nature of some of these engagements and the output doesn't seem to support a very concrete, clear, this is the only path, or these are the only possibilities, or these are your absolute constraints. It seems to the very confusion that exists within an organization. And we would put forward, and we are confident we'll do so in these podcasts using real live examples, that that's impossible. If there's any value in consulting or any value in giving insight, it is that you should be able to see some absolutes. Something should be in black and white. But adding to the gray only hides the ability for more waste to perpetuate.
Yeah. And again, I think one of my favorite topics, and I'd like to spend some time expounding on it, is why do we keep doing this? Why do we keep adding to the gray, as Jonathan just pointed out? If I know a consultant is just paid to give me an opinion, then why would I hire somebody else's opinion who has no experience in my organization? And that kind of brings us back to some of the premises, I think, that people think about hiring consultants. And I'll start with the first one. There is a level of just politicking that's been sort of established in the business world of, we hire a consultant to get a third party opinion so that we can help move our agenda internally. And ironically, I almost think this is one of the most legitimate reasons to use an external consultant. And that might be kind of incendiary, but in a way, if you know that you're in a political gridlock internally, especially at a high level, executive level, and you need to hire an external source to come in and provide additional data or additional perspective, just if nothing else to move the conversation, then that might actually be worth the cost if you can actually break the filibuster, so to speak, or move that forward out of committee into some action. But again, is that worth $500,000? Is that worth $1 million? That's, it's an outstanding question, right?
I would say, well, it is. I would say if they could truly provide an objective view that nobody could hide behind and that could actually move something forward in a meaningful way, that could be worth that amount of money because the politics are internally sometimes. You could even say that that's the reason for consulting engagement, and people would accept that. The problem is that it doesn't produce that result. It doesn't produce that truly objective, independent output, but rather, as I said, I'm getting into some of the reasons. Most of the time, people can't even follow it. They don't really understand how to execute. Most consultants don't stick around long enough with enough experience of the execution that they actually see the connection between some sort of roadmap and how it applies in the real world. And as we said, because it lacks the scientific rigor that we're speaking to, it lends itself to multiple possible outcomes. Whereas if things were more methodically laid out in a way that was universal, as we believe it definitely is possible, that would be much less likely to occur.
Yeah. Well, and even what Jonathan just pointed out, and I think is, it's implied, is the objective part. Do you hire an objective voice of reason to break up tough conversations, even in this particular use case, because you believe they're objective? And that's a question for you guys in the audience. Do you believe that a consultant can provide an objective opinion? Because again, I think it comes back around to the entire point of our company in these conversations, which is there objectivity in business? We believe so. But then if you can actually get behind that and you actually think you can talk to somebody who can come in with a clear perspective and an objective viewpoint and give you data and facts, then why would only that person be fit to do it? Then you kind of implicitly accept the reasoning that this can be objectively derived from either observation or having the right capabilities or having the right knowledge. And in which case that shouldn't be held tightly by particular consulting firms or any particular entity. It should be something that any of us could gather and acquire if it's just a matter of applying the right method or applying the right knowledge and receiving an objective outcome. So I think it is a question that if you're listening right now, you need to ask yourself, do you believe that? Or do you believe you're just hiring another opinion or hiring an external opinion? Because I think that's one fundamental split that Jonathan, you and I have talked about. And I think we've kind of gone past that point and we believe there is some objectivity to this space. But I think a lot of people need to be really reflect on that. And what is their expectation? Is that possible even?
Yeah, I would say that people can't know the answer to that because the numbers are just too astounding in the waste of consulting. There would be a much higher return of investment if it was more possible. But the fact that there's a less likely chance that there'll be a return of investment on any consulting engagement than not would indicate that it's not fulfilling any meaningful function in a routine way, because otherwise people would use it in that way and you'd see higher numbers of a return of investment. So I think it really just goes back to everybody sees the problems. They see the symptoms of the various problems, and they don't have an alternative right now. So they have to go to experts, whatever the nature of the problem is. And they don't have a choice of not doing that right now because then they're just stuck with the problem and it looks like they're just not doing anything about it, which I think, as you'll see when we start getting into real life use cases, in many instances, that's exactly what we would say. In many instances, we would say, yes, that's a problem. A mature organization knows not to touch that problem right now, or that it's not capable of touching that problem, or it's not in the right hierarchy of touching a problem. But for right now, I don't think they have those options.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point because it's the idea that, okay, there's this problem we just cannot surmount or we cannot solve. Let's say with our current capabilities, I'm a business and I have this problem I can't get over. It is almost just historical precedent in some way in the last few decades of business to say, well, there's knowledge and hired guns out there that proves that you're acting on it. If you can just go out and hire them and you can pull them in and you have the funds or the budget, you can say, I am working on this just by the merit of I've hired people who have more capability or have more knowledge. And that's really the consulting product. I always tell people, what do consultants sell? They're selling knowledge. They're selling capability. in the form of, let's say, research, or you're having extra people on the ground. But why would one hire knowledge? You have to admit that there's a gap in your own knowledge or capabilities internally. And you're saying that instead of trying to develop it or acquire it in-house, it's actually somehow cheaper, or you're going to get you a better return to pay a premium to just hire that capability that's already out there. But as we pointed out, they have no organizational context. They have no skin in the game most of the time. They may be there for 2 or 3 months. They may be there longer, but their skin in the game is getting you to pay them more for longer engagements and longer revenue cycles. So, hopefully, if you haven't thought about it this way, this is painting a picture of sort of an unhealthy marketplace where I'm supposed to be a consultant who's selling you capability to solve a particular gap in skill set or a problem you've identified. But my incentive is really to be working with you and helping you, prove to you that you need this capability as long as possible. And I think I've seen it time and time again. It becomes a toxic cycle.
That's another dimension you just added within that, Sam, is that sometimes what they're buying is time. So they're buying time because nobody wants to commit to a particular decision, or somebody thinks that a particular solution that they're going after within an organization will bear fruit if they just had more time. And adding a consultant just stops all decisions for a period of time and enables somebody to do some activity at the same time to further whatever agenda they have. So sometimes the consultant, rather than bringing clarity, is just adding more time to entrench different perspectives that should have been unraveled even before a consultant came in.
Yeah, it's an interesting way you put it. You're just buying time. I think it goes back to kind of putting it into the political bucket of why do we use consultants? Well, because we don't know what to do. And we just need time, or we need to have somebody else spend the time to look at it and tell us again what we should be doing instead of just acting on it ourselves, which a lot of times it's just stalling. A lot of times I've seen it firsthand, been hired to stall. I've also been hired personally in my career many times to step in right after another group of consultants finish their work. And oftentimes what I'm handed is something inactionable. And now they're saying, well, our new problem is we don't know how to act on what the first consultant told us. So now you consult and tell us how to do this and actually do something with it. I mean, I've seen that so many times. It's sort of crazy when you think about it.
And in fairness to the market currently, in many instances, if the consultant were to say at the outset, well, your objective client doesn't make sense, or your objective can't be realized, they wouldn't have a lot of work left to do. So that there's almost the nature of what you just talked about, the sales cycle that they have militates against giving that kind of real honest feedback right from the outset. Nor do people want to hear it. But we believe that if put it in as we said, a democratized fashion, that it's not about this methodology or that methodology, or it's about this person saying it or that person saying it, but it's just the fundamentals, the science is going to get you to that result every time. Or companies that try proceeding absent A, B, or C will fail every time. Well, then that's a whole different story.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, you tied it well back to what we started the podcast with this time, which is that we're trying to help people see more clearly what the problems are and what is a viable path to solve them. And as you're seeing the picture we're describing of the consulting industry, which is one of the problems that our company is trying to tackle, this sort of unhealthy consulting relationship model that's happening, a consultant is never incentivized, like Jonathon just said, to say, no, this problem doesn't need us right now. You can't solve this right now, and you need to kind of look elsewhere or build your own internal capability. Why would any consultant ever say that? If you approach somebody, there's integrity, but even integrity goes only so far when they also see it as their livelihood and they want to make it a problem they can fix. It's not even a lot of times an issue of malintent. I don't want anyone to think right off the bat that we're going out and saying all consultants are evil. Jonathon and I do a lot of consulting work. That's the majority of our work. I think the question is, when you actually want to help people and somebody presents a problem to you, you want to see that problem in a way that you can help solve it, even if that's not truly the case. And I think a lot of people are having those conversations out there because they want to get in there and they want to help. Yes, it's their livelihood, but also I think they think they can legitimately impact it. And if you had an objective tool or a method to say, almost like an arbiter of these conversations, to say, this is not something that needs to be on the table right now. This is not possible with a consultant. It's not possible with 100 more staff. It's just not happening. It's not a good idea based on a number of factors. it's trying to bring clarity to what can also be often be a very complex, heavy conversation.
And it's, at the end of the day, what I'd love to see is just at least people be more aware of the objective reality of what's going on around them. All too often in consulting engagements or when sitting in, high level meetings, basically what's being described to me can only result in what always the image that comes to my head are two cars hurling toward each other on a one-way street. And it's just a matter of time before they hit each other. Now, in the conversation or in the request that the clients are making, they don't see that. They don't see the logical extension of what must happen as a result of what they're trying to do. But we do. And we want to save that pain. And we also fundamentally believe that everybody wants to try and add value. Everybody wants to do the right thing. And even when we're talking about politics, usually it's because people genuinely they believe that their approach is going to result in the best thing for everybody. But at the end of the day, it can't all be right. And so if we can just open everyone's eyes to that reality, I think what we would call process vision, I think that we'd be pretty satisfied in having that impact.
Yeah. And process vision, it's something that we have been talking about a lot as part of Truvle, as part of our own career nomenclature, or taxonomy, I should say. And it's really like learning how to read in a different way, like any skill set. If you don't know how to read, you can look at a bunch of characters and you'll not make any sense out of it. But suddenly you learn how to read, or you learn how to see it a different way, and all this meaning is unlocked. That's similar to some of this process science or business science that we're talking about, which is there's certain fundamentals about how people are configured to work in a situation, how finances are applied, like all these business factors that go into a situation. And you have the right fundamental lens to look at it, to understand the process of it, this process vision, all of a sudden you can see the craziness of it, of one idea after another. And sometimes, like Jonathon said, you've got two cars hurtling toward each other. I oftentimes feel the same thing where I sit in a room and people are suggesting to me business activity that's like pushing water up a hill. And you just think, how could they not see it? But again, it's just because there's an unlock that hasn't happened. But that unlock is not going to happen if you hire a consultant or another company or anything really to solve a problem instead of give you the knowledge, give you the capability. And that's, I think, one of the biggest things I want to get across in this discussion, which is I think we should all be investing in capability building. Even just look at the marketplace as a comment on this. Everything's moving so fast now in the digitized marketplace. If you think like back in the 80s, it takes you a month to close a contract with a consultant and they take 6 months to solve a problem. If you think that could still be even close to acceptable today, the problem is gone in 2 months. The market moves faster. We don't have ramp up and ramp down times. If you want to survive, we have to take accountability for building capabilities. That's my deepest opinion. And I think that to build capabilities, you have to first know which capabilities you need, know what you don't have, and then you have to find the right resources. And I think, Jonathon and I feel passionate about providing those resources, and we're still trying to figure it out. We'll be transparent. We're trying to figure out how the best way to get them out there. But we want people to have that vision, to be able to see what we're seeing and be able to apply the fundamentals to help themselves and not think every time they have a problem, they need to rely on outside sources to really tag in and tackle it down, because it's not sustainable.
And you just think how another reason why this all persists is because whatever it is that an entity was trying to do shouldn't have been done to begin with, and they fail in doing it anyway. So it kind of cancels each other out, and it's just a lot of wasteful activity while the real value of an entity just continues. So it's just layering on top of it. So sometimes it's actually good that these efforts fail because the objective that would have been met would have been problematic regardless. What we're trying to do is get rid of some of that waste so that the actual value that's being produced could be there could be a lot more focus on that.
Yeah, spending your energy doing the right things is such a big focus of our company right now, and a lot of our early conversations, which is, how to do something right can be a bit more complicated. But, if you isolate what we've been talking about today, which is if you want to do anything, if you just take a breath and think, what do I need to ask myself to figure out, should I be doing this right now? I think that would be a good stopping point, just to say, how would I even know if I should be doing this right now? And if you can't answer that question, don't just start doing it. Activity is different than creating value. I think it's very high level nebulous terms. And I know we're throwing a lot of them around in this very first conversation you guys are having with us, but you can't equate activity to value adding activity. You just can't. And I think anyone who pauses and thinks about it for a second would know that that's true. But often we still act on the presumption that we have to be acting all the time. We have to show that we're being productive. We have to be running around and looking busy. And that's something we have to combat. Jonathan and I
And
fought a lot about this when I said we have to stop. We can't just keep moving. I remember that was our earliest conflicts, right, Jonathan?
And that's the final thought I'll have is that one of the biggest problem is that everyone's measured on activity. And so it's really hard to justify, well, I'm doing nothing and that's how I'm helping the company. So there's almost like the incentive is to have the appearance of producing and doing something, even if that activity is ultimately harmful. Whereas if we can present what we're trying to present here in the tool, hopefully it'll start showing a lot more people that maybe they should be inactive as well if they really want to help their company.
Yeah, and that's a whole podcast we can do, but I'll tell you guys who are listening, and this is why I'm considered a bad consultant, or maybe I had a bad first technical interview with Jonathan, because I will still advise to this day, stop what you're doing. That's my advice. Just stop and just do nothing for a second. People can't compute that. But sometimes if any of you are studied with lean or a lot of basic process improvement, activity hides waste. A lot of times, if you want to expose the real problem or the real path to success, you have to stop passively contributing to it by appearing active and covering up what's happening. Sometimes it is the most impactful thing you can do. Stay silent. Don't participate. Consciously abstain. These are some of my favorite tools. They're very unpopular for a reason. I know it feels very counterintuitive.
But our goal here is to make that popular.
To make it popular. Make the unpopular popular.
So
yeah.
I think
I was going to say, I think that's a good closing thought for our first conversation. I know we tried to cover a lot. I want everyone to get the sense, at least from me, that we're nutty. We're very passionate about these problems. We hope to have a lot of really crazy conversations coming up about maybe more tactical topics, but we wanted to, hopefully this will give you an impression of the wild world of what we're trying to tackle at Truvle. So crazy or not, I guess you guys can help us decide as we go.